one of the things in the Tucker Carlson interview was basically how he said Boris Johnson is the reason there's still fighting going on, that there was a peace deal on the table. Putin claims it was signed or initialed. He kind of vacillated a little bit on that, but some indication that the Ukrainians were accepting it, and Boris Johnson came into town and scuttled it. So you want to talk about, we've had this claim together with some interesting things of our own resident here, the infirmed in chief, kind of failed leadership on the left and right.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some of our American listeners, or just really our listeners outside of England who might not know so much about British politics, Boris Johnson was the leader of the Conservative Party in the UK, which, just so we're clear, that does not make them sort of conservative in the way we think about it. All of the different parties in Europe are much more left-leaning than the ones here, even the one here in even the United States. So Boris
It's
Johnson
like
was
the one in Canada is even worse.
Oh, yeah, right. It's so all of these, it's Boris Johnson, not necessarily a conservative bulwark, but I must say, even back in the day of Brexit, I was a big fan of Boris Johnson because he wanted to get the UK out of the EU. But anyways, yes, Putin highlighted that Boris Johnson sort of told the Ukrainians not to sign this peace deal. That it seemed, we don't know exactly what the terms would have been, but it would have ended the war at the very least.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to highlight is that the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom is completely failing because they've let down their country. And one of the things I wanted to show is firstly to talk about the immigration crisis. We think it's bad here in the United States. I think you can make the argument it's actually worse in the United Kingdom. And we've talked about this on the show extensively in Europe in general, with these Muslim immigrants taking over these different nations. I wanted to start out with a video. This is right outside the Parliament, right? This is the United Kingdom right here. This is the center of England. Here's what's going on there. Right, so we see a sort of Muslim procession. I quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. It looks like some sort of coffin they've got. Got a bunch of men shirtless on right outside of Parliament. We've got sort of black flags, banners. To put it simply, it's an invasion. These men have taken over this country, and this is due to the Conservative Party's lax immigration policies, despite promising its voters that it was going to fix this issue, when in fact it's made it worse. So what's happening in the United Kingdom now with this? Of course, the economy is being tanked by this. The lives of Englishmen it's becoming worse and worse by the day. What is happening? Well, this is the map of what's going to happen here, there in England. And as you can see, the red is the Labour Party's gains. And so as you see, this is it's devastating for the Conservative Party. The last election, all of that dark red was held by conservative parties or associated parties that weren't the Conservative Party, and the Labour Party seeming is going to take over most of the country. And it should be stated that most people in the United Kingdom, even left-leaning people, don't like the Labour Party. They're just as bad as the Conservative Party. They don't really satisfy anyone. Just so we can really get a full extent, here's what the enormous defeat for the Tories would look like. The Tories is a shorthand really for conservatives.
Behind the Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
Who were always like the sort of third party that had like a couple of seats. Wow.
Exactly. And this has happened once before in, yes, really once before in English politics, where the Liberal Party got destroyed and the Labour Party sort of took over as the prominent left-leaning party. The Liberal Party was known for sort of that John Stuart Mill type of liberalism, classical liberalism, if you want to call it that. And lastly, I don't want to make this a sort of racial thing, but it's hard not to mention this. This is what the demographics have become over there in the United Kingdom. Notice around London there and all of the major cities, the white British people don't have their country anymore. And again, you can make the argument that the United Kingdom really isn't a British ethnicity, but I think there's something to it. Look at how the London is completely different. You can't even call London British anymore in the sense, or English in that sense. The whole map of the country is completely different, and it's hard to see how this nation can come back without a return to what makes our country stable, which is sort of like what I mean, I'm not going to endorse what everything Putin has said or done, but there's something about sort of a promotion of a national identity that is worthwhile. And so I think we're going to start seeing a conservative movement that needs to be forced to actually get something of substance rather than being this weak thing that we have going on with the Tories in the United Kingdom.
What's stunning about that map is, if you remember, that when the most recent election that the Tories won, the Conservatives won, was like 180 degrees from that. It was one of the greatest landslides in British politics. They won seats in Parliament that had been held by Labour for decades, and it was kind of, everybody was predicting like, this is the Labour Party's finished, it's incredible. And now, less than 5 years later,
Mm.
this is what it, again, it's a poll, but if it were held today and their clock is ticking, they're going to have their election, pretty soon, is like an extraordinary reversal. Now, what happened in between those dates? Essentially, the COVID, the conservatives just let the country down. I mean, they just destroyed their country. I mean, you think it was bad here, it was horrific in London in particular. And they've essentially, all that Brexit promised, they've destroyed by wrecking their country and not being actually conservative. They won this massive mandate and squandered it. I mean, they changed prime ministers like every 5 minutes because they just had no plan. They had no agenda, and that's sort of the fate of fickle politicians. Is kind of the lesson there, I think.
And it was their battle to lose, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
because I mean, you mentioned those seats. The north of England is historically Labour voting, and they
Yes.
won a lot of those seats. It was seen as a sort of a political miracle at the time. It's sad that the Conservatives didn't get a good Catholic in there like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who would have made an
Yes.
amazing prime minister. But unfortunately, they seem bent on political correctness rather
Yeah.
than political truth.